Alright, so hi everyone, welcome to the Surf Connections podcast. This podcast is about connecting all girls and women of all ages and cultures who share a passion and love for the ocean. Surfing Victoria acknowledges its head office is based on Wadawurrung country. We pay respects to Wadawurrung people and their elders past and present. We appreciate the coastline of traditional lands that we are able to surf and understand the importance of respecting country. We extend our acknowledgement to all the traditional lands you are gathered on to listen to this podcast. Okay, so my name is Angela King and I'm your host. I'd also like to introduce my co-host and moderator, Monica Fleming.
Hello, I'm Monica, or Mon. So Ange and I are super excited because in the series of podcasts, we're going to be tackling to many influential girls and women whose profession, career or lifestyle have evolved and flourished around the ocean and its waves.
That's right. So these girls and women have essentially paved the way for our many others and are prime examples of what can be achieved within surfing for all of us. So super exciting. It's my pleasure to roll into introducing our first ever guest. She's a devoted surfer at heart and a practicing lawyer by profession. Naturally combining the two, she is definitely paving the way for our girls and women surfing in Victoria, as she is actually the first ever female chair of the surfing board in Victoria. So with great excitement, we are so pleased to welcome Ashleigh Wall. Hi, Ash.
Hi, girls. Amazing intro. That was well done. Thank you for having me.
Oh, our pleasure. Thank you so much for coming. It's really, really awesome. So we have a few base questions just to ask you. And so can you just tell us a real basic thing? Can you tell us about where you grew up and where you started surfing so everyone understands all that?
Yeah. So I grew up in Barwon Heads, Victoria, which was a very different place to it is now. It was a pretty sleepy seaside town then. I probably started surfing with my dad. I think after days spent at the beach watching him surf from the shore, I finally convinced him to push me onto my first wave, and I think I was hooked since then. And then kind of me and my sister nagging my dad, I think he sort of took us to, I think there was a girls go surfing day at Anglesey. It was, I think, Surfing Vic and Go Ride a Wave sort of ran that in conjunction with Rip Curl, and that was my ultimate hook. But then I didn't have a surfboard, so I had my dad's boards, which were obviously a little big for me. I was about 14, so I think I saved my pocket money, bought a secondhand strapper board from Rasta in Barwon Heads and some bike racks, and then that was I had all my gear ready to go.
That is so awesome. I love that you said that the first time the experience apart from your dad was actually an event run by Surfing Vic. I thought that's kind of cool. Come back to your roots as such. So what type of boards have you gravitated to since those early days? What's been your kind of jam that you've gone to?
I think historically I've surfed shortboards, pretty standard shape, 5'11" thruster type board. I think probably more recently, due to sort of a few factors, injury and probably just curiosity and more boards being available, I've been exploring surfing other boards like logs and kind of mid-lengths and fishes, which is really fun. And I think it just kind of encourages me to get in the water more and surf different spots and kind of meet different people.
Well, that's so awesome. Yeah, I reckon too, if you have more of a variety within your quiver, you definitely get to surf more. It's way more options, plenty to choose from then in all conditions. So Matt, what is your favourite wave then? Even though you surf a variety now, what's your favourite wave you like?
I think can I give you a couple? I think I've got a couple. I've got I think Sunshine Beach, the beaches up there and the points at Noosa, when they're on.
Yeah.
That's probably just because they're really fun waves and you have to wear a wetsuit. But also probably sentimentally, I've got I sort of got some really wonderful memories surfing there with my dad as a kid. And then I think probably locally, number one for me is probably Beacon at 13th.
Oh, yeah.
I think there's probably no place like home, and I think I feel most comfortable with that wave and just knowing all the people in the water there. So yeah.
Yeah, cool. Oh, they're both epic spots. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, I was going to say, I feel like you've picked two great spots.
Yeah.
So
We just can't get to Queensland yet.
no, no, not a little weekend away, unfortunately, to Noosa. That oh my gosh.
Yeah.
So do you have the most memorable surf, like something that, you know, is embedded in your mind, that whether it's, you know, it'd be good to be positive, but good or bad, or a moment that was kind of something you either frothed on, or, you know, something that's led you surfing a direct pathway, or, you know, in that retrospect?
Yeah, I think let's keep it positive.
Yeah. Yeah, that'd be good.
I think probably in terms of like maybe waves less traveling, like I got this like one surf that I think I often remember. I was on a surf trip in the Tello Islands, and it was the first time I went there. I went on this surf trip by myself, which was, in hindsight, I'm surprised I did that. But I remember catching a wave, and
I love that.
like I just remember thinking like the water was just like so pristine, and like I remember on a wave and like you just couldn't see the distinction between the wave and the bottom of the ocean. And I constantly just remember this like picture of like the coral reef below, and I'm like, that was paradise for me. I was like, prior to that, I'd really mainly just surfed around Australia and like Bali and other places, but not like just absolute tropical paradise. So that's kind of something I always remember.
That's so awesome.
It's a nice little like cherry on the top for
Yeah.
all your memories, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's a really cool one.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've been there myself.
And I think probably, yeah, I was going to say like probably more recently, like when we surfed the wave pool for the first time last year, like I would like that just blew my mind.
You were
which is yeah.
You were
Yeah.
like, it was so cool to see.
Yeah, if you asked me for one, I gave you three, I think.
Yeah, no, that's fine.
Two or three.
No, well, I definitely agree with like both those things as well. Oh my gosh, like so awesome. The Tello Islands, it's like I've been there myself, and it's just that real cliche perfection. I remember seeing like in magazines when I was younger, you know, like in pictures.
Yeah.
That, yeah, oh my gosh, like amazing. And the wave pool, so epic. Can't go wrong. Seriously, it's like,
yeah, like two polar opposites, but like
yeah,
two perfect waves.
Yeah, exactly. It's so awesome. So we've just got a few things like, you know, that we want to touch on with your, you know, again, how you grew up and what's, you know, led you in this path where you're at now. And so did you have like a specific group of people or a person that you surfed with regularly growing up, or?
Yeah. I had like probably who I've touched on, my dad, that I surf with a lot, but then also when I started surfing, I had sort of a group of girls from Barwon Heads and Ocean Grove who all kind of got into surfing at the same time. And so I think we were all kind of varying abilities, but we all just kind of got hooked on surfing, and that kind of sort of dictated our weeks as teenagers, which was pretty awesome. Then I've probably got like one real surf buddy, Casey, who she was a couple of years older than me growing up, and I always really looked up to her, and she's now one of my best friends, and just love surfing with her because we sort of push each other, and it's just, we just have so much fun together. And so yeah.
And were you girls a part of a board riders club or anything growing up, or did you
Yes.
stick with the two of you?
Yeah, so we I think my girlfriends and I joined 13th Beach board riders like not long after we started surfing, so we definitely weren't at like a competitive level. We're very much beginners, but we we're pretty fortunate to at that time the club had a group of sort of older girls who sort of took us under their wing and really pushed us, you know, just little things like taught us how to do pop-ups on the shore and cheered us onto waves and pushed us out the back at 13th when we were like, it's way too big. So yeah, that was kind of, yeah, we joined there. So the club was like, yeah, it was really awesome.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so it's always good to hear that perception, you know, of clubs, because a lot of people, like I know from my experiences, are nervous to join clubs and don't realise it's not just about an intensity to compete, you know, like you actually get a lot of skills and confidence, I feel, along the way, you know, if you...
The opportunity to meet people that are into the thing that makes you so happy and passionate about. So
yeah, definitely.
There's some little pockets of gold in those clubs.
Yeah, so good. So you were saying about the girls that were, you know, pushing you and everything like that. Was there like a massive group of you guys, or was it only quite small in your community, you know, within surfing? Like, you know how those...
Well, like definitely wasn't like a huge group of girls. It was like definitely sort of two older girls, Mel Renton and M Casey, who were like a bit older than us. And I think, like, I often sort of say to people that, you know, back then we probably wouldn't have termed them as like role models. I don't think we really used that word back then, but looking back, I think they probably really were. Like, they were kind of the ultimate role models, and kind of like really pushed the social aspect of surfing, and really were really inclusive in the way they approached the club. So like we had, it was definitely competitive, but it was definitely also like the social aspect that kind of kept everyone together. So we were really blessed, I guess, as juniors to have people that took the time out to teach us. So it was really awesome.
And how did that kind of change from you, from like transitioning from like your junior surf and that role models, like leading into like your adolescence and then on to being a bit of a young adult, and from there, what did surfing look like then for you?
Yeah, I think probably sort of I think for me, like, surfing was always like the social aspects of surfing, and like the friendships kind of like inspired by the older girls is kind of probably what kept us going. And I don't think like I was ever really motivated by like performance outcomes or winning. I did a lot of sort of other competitive sport, a lot of competitive running. So surfing for me was always kind of my outlet away from the competitive pursuit.
That makes sense. Yeah, that's awesome. You had that, as opposed to the competitive nature it can take, that you had surfing in that group of girls that, you know, it was your outlet as opposed to that intensity. I think that's a really good way you can be as well.
Absolutely.
Like both ways.
Yeah.
Especially.
No, I was just going to say, I think like sort of that was so, you know, probably like 15 or more years ago now, that was like a real push I think a lot of clubs then. And then I think there was like a bit of a pivot to more competitive, sort of board riders clubs, purely sort of competitive avenue. But I reckon like the last few years there's like definitely been this shift kind of just to both the performance side of things, but like the community connection for board riders clubs. Like I know 13th has kind of pivoted and kind of looking at almost doing the model that we had back when I was a teenager, again, to get more girls involved and realizing the value of just having competition but fun and being inclusive.
Yeah, so awesome.
Yeah.
I think that would only foster, like, my opinion, I could be wrong, but foster more girls being in the water, you know, like, as opposed to the other.
Totally.
Yeah. So awesome.
When you were little, did you ever imagine being involved in Surfing Victoria in the way that you are now, and have such an influential role on not only like the little grongs that are coming up, but also the women that have come through the pathways of Surfing Victoria?
No, absolutely not. Yeah, totally. Yeah, not at all. I think there's like probably trying to think like a few reasons for that. Like one, I think at a base level, like I probably didn't appreciate or know like there was such a role existed. Like, and I actually sort of honestly don't think rightly or wrongly, I think I probably also had a perception that there was a bit of a positive correlation between like the best surfers and those getting opportunities outside of the water, but in the surf industry. And also I think probably like one thing we often talk about is like when I would have looked, had I known the positions were available, I think had I looked at the people in like leadership roles in sport, like not so long ago, you'd see a lot of guys and not so many females, or not a lot of diversity. So this, I think, is really improving, but often we like to talk about this concept of if you can't see it, you can't be it. And I think probably for me back then, I don't think I would have been able to see it. So I wouldn't have appreciated or, you know, dreamed there was an opportunity to influence the sport of surfing in a different way.
Yeah. And what has it been like kind of being, I guess, in your role with the Surfing Big Board? It was kind of at that pivot point for women in girls in sport, especially in those leadership roles. Has it been, what's that experience been like, being kind of at the forefront or at the kind of the early days of that change?
Yeah, I think like kind of looking back, I think there's like definitely an element of like self-doubt. Like you know, early on I was like, oh, I don't know if I quite fit in around the board table. And just like naturally just sort of questioning. Like
that sort of changed, or were there things that kind of that you put in place within yourself that switched that mindset you had, or like that feeling of?
I think probably just like kind of naturally I'm someone that really backs myself, but I definitely kind of had an element of self-doubt, or you know, that imposter syndrome, or like I guess kind of fake it till you make it. But I think but I think like once I've kind of becoming more exposed like in the surf industry, like, you know, what you do realize is like there's so many like talented and capable women and girls in Victoria, like who are role models, and most of them are not known or their stories are not told. So I think I kind of, I guess, more I stepped into that space, you'd see, you know, ordinary women and girls achieving like amazing things and in leadership, and like just different avenues that you can take surfing. So I like, kind of, I guess, sort of kudos to you guys for like putting together this podcast, because I think for like young girls being able to showcase or see different avenues of women and girls in surfing, I think that's probably something that I didn't have so much in like the leadership space. Like there was a lot of girls in sort of the high performance surfing space, but out of the water, I think it was it wasn't as visible.
Yeah. Also like understanding where you fit in something, in a sport that you love. And
definitely.
I can see where the storytelling, and Ange and I was always talk about how our stories shape other people's stories as much as they shape our own. So I think you're right, like being able to have little insights into other people's stories and their journey in surf. Pretty cool opportunity.
Yeah, and like that's what I think we've said a lot. Like I think like storytelling is like the key to building like a new normal, and like increasing the number of women and girls, you know, and the diversity in surfing and holding positions of leadership. So I don't know, it's the same as women in business. Like you just got to tell the stories, and sometimes that way a couple of people will see the pathway that's there for them, which is pretty amazing.
A little question, Ash, was around, do you think some of the challenges that you found in the sports leadership and admin space are similar to perhaps some of the barriers for women in business and in that sort of realm?
Oh, like absolutely. There's a lot of, I think there's particularly the industry that I've chosen to work in, which is the law, which is like, in a weird way, I'm sure not many people want to hear this, but there's actually a lot of correlations between the sport of surfing and law as a female. Like, you know, traditionally, you know, very male-dominated, professional male-dominated sport. A lot of the female roles or women's roles in the law were in that sort of administrative assistant role. A lot of women historically stood on the beach. So it's like there's almost like a couple of like real sort of similarities. But again, like there's always like a couple of people that sort of pave the way, or a couple of people that open the doors for you that, you know, if you kind of step into that space and, you know, I guess make the most of the opportunity, you know, the more women that are in those positions, and then it's really just a new normal.
Yeah.
So, and that's like, admittedly, like when I jumped on the board of Surfing Vic, there was, you know, one other female on the board at the time, and really it was just as much about the, you know, the men that were around the board table to actually create an environment that welcomed a young female lawyer in her late 20s to jump the, you know, so it's not just about women paving the way for women, it's about it's a conversation for men and women, boys and girls.
Yeah, that's so awesome.
And do you find that the strengths that you've like and the skills you've learned in opening those doors and breaking down those barriers have kind of leaned up, like things that you've learned from your role on the board to your professional work? Do you think there's been links of the skill transfer, or do you think one relates more than the other?
No, like I think they're kind of, I almost feel like there's so much alignment between the two, but I also think like kind of taking a step back, surfing itself as a sport, like I feel like what I've learned through like surfing, like, you know, self-reliance, confidence, you know, appreciating the little things, you know, and having to sort of take off on a bigger wave when someone calls you into it, and you kind of just have to take that leap. Like I think those kind of lessons in surfing apply to like the business world, or if you're starting your own business, or also like if you're taking a position of leadership or stepping into a new role in your job. Like I think that for me is why surfing is so beautiful, because it just teaches you these lessons that you don't realize you're getting at the time, but then when you jump on the land, you're like, oh, actually I've built some confidence thanks to the ocean, which is pretty amazing.
So it's almost like it helps you build resilience, doesn't it? I feel like surfing, if you look at it that way, you know, within your everyday aspects, you know, I personally have had that experience, and sounds like yourself too, by that little bit that's, you know, you're in the water, you're pushing yourself, you know, you need to have that resilience to continue with your surfing, to continue past those moments, you know, that you don't want to go on that bigger wave. And yeah, I think it's kind of awesome that it translates too for yourself into the work.
Yeah.
Well,
totally. And like, you know, like think about those surfs when you like you paddle out and you're like, oh shit, it's a little bit bigger than I thought.
Yeah,
and you're kind of like halfway out the back and you're like, okay, I'm just gonna paddle out here anyway.
Yeah.
And then like you duck over a wave and you're like, actually it wasn't that bad. Or you get knocked off and you get back up and you're like, it's not that bad. But I didn't have a choice because the wave's coming at me. I had to dive under. Like I just don't have a choice. And like that kind of being thrown into the moment is, I guess, kind of when you're like in other areas, you're kind of a lot calmer under pressure because you're like, really, what's the worst that can happen?
Yeah,
exactly.
And it's like you just back yourself, don't you? It's like that learning to know that you've got all the tools you need in your toolkit to
do that confidence about yourself, for sure. No, that's so awesome. Yeah. So do you think too, saying that, like, what's the vibe? Well, do you think the vibe has changed for you growing up in the water as a female? Is it different from how it was when you were a kid to how it is now? You know, when you started surfing?
Yeah, I think like surfing in the water, I think it's definitely become a lot more serious. And I think the vibe, you know, for me is a little bit more competitive in, you know, certain locations. Like, because as I sort of said, like I used to do a lot of competitive running, and so surfing for me was always kind of my outlet away from the competitive world. So I kind of like come at it probably at a slightly different angle because I've naturally sometimes gravitated away from the competitive side of surfing. So I'm probably more attuned to it. But I think that's it. I think it's really important that surfing, I guess, as a sport has professionalized, and there's now like these clear pathways for competitive surfers. But I think like the core surfer in me really hopes that we don't lose that beauty of surfing, like not as a sport, like surfing as a lifestyle. That for me is what's so important.
Well, it's relevant to all surfers. It's like something Ange always talks about. We're all surfers at the end of the day.
Yeah, that was something that my dad said to me when I was little. Like, you step in the water, it doesn't matter your skill levels, like male, female, age, whatever, we're all surfers, so you've got to respect each other in the water. And, you know, and sometimes that wouldn't happen, and I'd be like, oh, Dad, you said this is what everyone is meant to do. It's definitely, I don't know, I thought that was always a really good thing that he said to me, you know, and I can understand what you mean by it changing, you know, over time. And you're right, it creates good pathways though, that competitive drive for some, which is awesome. But yeah, I do purely hope, obviously I'm a competitive surfer, or I have been in my past, and I do hope personally too that it's not lost, you know, just the fun side of that, and like just getting together, girls, you know, guys, whatever, like just enjoying the moment and not being someone line up all the time.
Yeah. And I think, I think that's like a good point. Like, I think, you know, one thing that definitely has changed, which kind of excites me, is like the diversity in the water, like not just more like women and girls, you know, but also just like people with such diverse backgrounds, you know, and there's opportunities for people with like, you know, even people with disabilities to find they can now access and enjoy surfing. So that's kind of like, I feel like compared to when I was a kid, there probably wasn't that broader diversity in the water. So that is where I think like the ability to connect people with different backgrounds, they've just got this common love of the ocean. It's pretty cool.
Such a good point. I love that. Like, what advice would you give your younger self, or another little grom that's just starting surfing, like little girl that's getting into it? What would be your best advice?
Yeah, I think maybe it's easier to give as being a bit older, but just to be yourself, and don't be so hard on yourself. I think I did used to get quite intimidated in the water, like not by the waves, but probably just by other people in the water. So if I could, you know, give everyone the confidence, you know, to be themselves, that would be pretty awesome.
Love that.
Is there anything you sort of do when you're out in the water that kind of, whenever you start to lean back into that intimidation, that you kind of, is there a line that you say to yourself in your head, or is there something you do that kind of just brings you away from that train of thought?
I think I do have a pretty good ability to just sort of be quite realistic. Like, it's just surfing. It's like there's so many more waves out there. Like, so I probably just, and I remember this tip, like this guy once gave me in the water actually. It was actually one of my friend's dads, which was like a really big day out at Beacon, and I was like, oh, this is a bit scary. And he was like, you know, he was telling me like a 6-foot wave, so you just got to mentally, and that's where I sometimes was like not really scared of the waves, but more like, oh, if I fall off and waste a wave, or, you know, getting someone's way. I remember he said to me, you know, just think of a 6-foot wave as 3 2-foot waves. And I was like, that's so simple. But like, so, and that's, which, so for me, like, you literally, like, yes, it all happens very quickly, but really just thinking like you just, you know, 3 lots of 2-foots, pretty easy to just kind of cruise down the line. So don't, like, that's kind of something when it's a bit bigger, if I'm getting a bit intimidated, probably more about the vibe in the water, I just kind of think, it's just 3 6-foot waves and there's just water at the bottom, so we'll be fine.
It's not like you're on cement or anything hardcore like that. It's just a bit of water.
No, that's
totally
good, Ash.
It's been really awesome. And like, we just got a little ending question. It's kind of silly, kind of fun. we wanted to throw it in. So if your life was a book, what title would it be?
Oh.
I know, it's a bit...
Okay. It's an amazing question. It's an amazing question, but it's hard. I think you could probably play with my surname and my first name a bit. Wall. That's kind of not a good one, but that's someone that people always pick up on. But I think I'm just going to steal a title from another person's book, only because I'm just finished reading it. I think Michelle Obama's book, Becoming. So her rationale behind the title is she talks about her journey as the journey of always continually evolving. And I think that's kind of just what a lot of us are doing, particularly this year. We're just learning, adapting and evolving and just trying to I guess kind of be the best versions of ourselves, be the best mums, the best friends, best colleagues. And I think, I like that whole notion of becoming it's a journey. There's nothing stagnant.
Love that. Yeah, that's really awesome.
Maybe it could be Becoming a Wall.
Okay, perfect. Done.
Awesome. Love it. Hey, cool, Ash. Thank you so much, honestly, for, I just want to acknowledge as well, I know we said it in the intro a bit, but for those that aren't aware, Ash is a big reason behind why this podcast is actually up and going, being, the chair of the board in Surfing Victoria. So she's been working with countless others to get a whole, more quality program up and going within Surfing Vic. Mon's probably better to brush on that more professionally.
I think you're doing a good job.
No, I just wanted to acknowledge how awesome that is, and we really appreciate you, being the forefront and pushing that forward for everyone and getting it kicking. So thank you so much for coming, Ash. Really cool talking.
Great. Thanks, girls. I think Surfing Vic's in good hands with the two of you. So I really look forward to hearing the next few podcasts roll out. Thank you.
Thank you.